On the domestic side this morning, with 38 days until Election Day, the Harris campaign just announced its post-VP debate plan. Both Vice President Harris and Governor Walz will take their bus tour back to Pennsylvania. You can expect manufacturing and the economy to be priorities for those events. And just yesterday, Harris visited a border town in Arizona to address what she called the nation's broken immigration system. Joining us now is Harris Walz's Principal Deputy Campaign Manager, Quinton Fulks.
Good morning, Quinton. A lot to get to today. I appreciate that campaign is already blasting forward ahead to after the VP debate, but I want to ask you about that debate, both how Governor Walz is preparing for that debate and how the campaign is defining success going into the debate.
Well, look, first of all, good morning, and thank you all for having me. I would say that we know that J.D. Vance is a skilled debater. He has been preparing for this. He has the pressure of trying to make up for Donald Trump's disastrous debate performance. Governor Walz does not. But what you're going to see is a contrast between a skilled politician, a slick talker, somebody who openly admits that he is willing to say whatever to make the case to the American people. And on the other side with Governor Walz, a public school teacher who knows what Americans are going through, who speaks in common sense language about the issues, kitchen table issues that are at stake in this election. And it's fundamentally going to be a choice between two different visions. One, under the J.D. Vance and Donald Trump agenda, Project 2025, of continuing to take away rights, whipping away freedoms across this country, having women across this country literally die because of the archaic nature of policy that they continue to try to push down our throats. And on the other side, for Governor Walz and Vice President Harris, an agenda and an opportunity economy for everybody, not just to get by, but to get ahead, to continue to tackle the things that are impacting Americans every single day. And Governor Walz is going to make that case.
You know, Quinton, I remember the last debate in a presidential campaign between two potential vice presidents, then Senator Harris and then a former, and at the time, Vice President Mike Pence. And the VP debates are very different, right? They are, I would argue, oftentimes much more substantive, a little more demure, if you will. And it is not about the two people usually sitting at the table. It's more so about the folks of whom they represent, their running mates at the top of the ticket. But this debate, I think, will be different. J.D. Vance has been at the forefront of a lot of some of the most inflammatory rhetoric on the campaign trail. I'm thinking particularly about the racist conspiratorial lie about Haitian immigrants in Springfield and across the country. How is Governor Walz preparing to tackle that portion of the debate?
Look, I think these vice presidential debates are important because, again, God forbid anything happens to either candidate at the top of the ticket. These are the individuals who would have to step up. And J.D. Vance has proven just how dangerous he is, just how erratic, out of touch he is. It's hard to top Donald Trump when it comes to that category of things, but J.D. Vance seemingly does it every time he opens his mouth. And Governor Walz is going to continue to communicate and focus on introducing himself to the American people, while at the same time talking about Vice President Harris's vision for this country and putting it in stark contrast with the plans of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. But J.D. Vance can't help himself. He continues to stand down on or stand behind the erratic behaviors of Donald Trump, while at the same time trying to hide the fact that literally before he became Donald Trump's partner, he was one of his harshest critics. And so I hope that on the debate stage, he's asked about his past comments of Donald Trump and why now suddenly the policy positions are okay. And he's even willing to go further. And so I think that that is the approach and the conversations that Americans are going to hear on the debate stage. But this is an extremely important debate, and Americans should tune in and pay attention.
Part of the contrast in vision, of course, around immigration. We saw the vice president at the border just yesterday. I want to take a little listen to some of what she had to say in Arizona.
We should not permit scapegoating instead of solutions. And let's see what's happening. Let's not permit scapegoating instead of solutions, or rhetoric instead of results. As your president, I will protect our nation's sovereignty, secure our border, and work to fix our broken system of immigration. And I will partner with Democrats, Republicans, and independents to do it.
Quentin, we know what Donald Trump's vision of immigration in this country looks like. He wants to build a wall. He wants to deport 11 million people. I think what we heard yesterday from the vice president is that it is possible to both secure our border, have an orderly and humane system there, and embrace immigrants on the interior of this country. DACA recipients, dreamers, people who have built their lives here, what the administration is currently doing with families belong together, keeping American families together, parole in place. Can we expect to see Governor Walz lean into that message of both ends, which I would argue really distinguishes this ticket from the folks you're running against?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, immigration is going to be a topic of discussion, and it's an important one, and it's something that's on the mind of American voters, which is why Vice President Harris visited the border yesterday. And I think the point that she is making is that look at what is happening. Somebody is actually putting in the work, and somebody is talking about it and continuing to stand in the way of progress. Vice President Harris supported a bipartisan bill that would have been the strongest and toughest on border and immigration in American history. Donald Trump opposed that bill and told Republicans to blow it up. She went there yesterday to talk about the need for more border agents, which if Donald Trump wouldn't have stand in the way, would already be at the border. She went there yesterday to talk about the fact that we have to stop the flow of fentanyl into this country. And also, it's a two-pronged approach. It's not only stopping fentanyl from coming into this country, it's also about making sure that you're going to the root cause and going after the Chinese government who is producing the chemicals to continue to make fentanyl. So she has a multi-pronged approach to deal with this, and she is the only candidate in this race that has the experience of going after cartels, transnational gangs, to stop the flow of fentanyl, to stop human trafficking. Donald Trump continues to double down on dangerous rhetoric and only keep this issue in play because he thinks it scores him political points, while at the end of the day, Americans are dealing with this, and they want common sense leaders who are going to work across the aisle with some of the most conservative voices. That's what Vice President Harris has done and would do as President of the United States. Donald Trump is just all talk.
Quentin, before we let you go, Notice, and NBC News has not independently confirmed this yet, but Notice recently reported that there has been some consternation with the Harris-Walz campaign as it relates to spending with black vendors, black firms. There, reportedly, Derek Johnson, president of the NAACP, expressed frustration on an August call with the manager of your campaign. Can you speak to this? These frustrations, I mean, people are saying in these articles and in strategists that I've talked to that there is a concern that black voters are critical to this election, yet black vendors are not being a key part of telling their stories, and the money, the record money that has been being brought in is not equitably being spent.
Yeah, well, thank you for letting me address this question. I mean, President Johnson had that conversation with me directly. Look, obviously, African-American voters are extremely important. There's no way that we can win this election, get to 270 electoral votes, win any state without turning out African-American voters and also persuading them. We saw a mass consolidation of African-American voters to Vice President Harris when she became the top of the ticket, but that is by no means that we take those voters for granted. And so we have been working to make sure that we are putting more resources into black-owned media outlets to tell the message to black voters. We have black vendors on our campaign who are creating the content that we are pushing out. Obviously, we have to do more. This is a margin of error race. It is a tight race. A lot is at stake. Again, I know, and I read the article myself, because it's important to me that we get this right. We have to inject resources on the ground to the communities and the groups that are doing the work. Our campaign has been doing that. We will continue to do more. We are pulling together a working group to make sure that we are really doubling down, to make sure that we're not missing any gaps when it comes to this issue. We are proud of the work that we have been doing to reach voters all across this country, and in particular, black voters. We have an HBCU tour coming up. We're partnering with the CBC to do some engagements that you'll be hearing about later this month. But we obviously have to do more, and we will continue to do more. We will fix this issue. We will continue to make sure that we are investing in the African-American community to turn out every single vote that we can, because it's too important to leave any stone unturned.
Quentin Fulks, thank you, as always, for your time.